My name is William Ham, and the thematic review topic that I chose is the role of government because personally I think it's the most important part of a civilization, and if you don't have a government, there's no way that you're going to survive for many years. So, the importance of government. Having a strict and powerful government is one of the most important things a civilization can have to sustain themselves for many years. If you don't have set rules, then people are just going to revolt against you. There's going to be chaos throughout your land. It's just not going to go well. And we see this from Mesopotamian cultures all the way through what we have today, that there are social classes that people are in, and power is divided between people. Having a strong government is crucial to each civilization we have looked at throughout this class so far, and yeah. So in Mesopotamia, the first time that we actually see a form of government was when the Amorites formed the city of Babylon. Before this, there was many city-states, and they were never together, and there was often war in between them. And when the Amorites took power, they were under rule of Hammurabi, and he realized that at the rate that they were growing, they needed guidelines for them to prosper. So the first time that laws were put in place to strengthen the government was from the Hammurabi's Code. This code contained 282 laws that the Babylonian Empire had to follow. These laws had three main principles, and they were retaliation, punishment, and government responsibility. Today, we would see some of these laws as a little bit harsh, and we definitely wouldn't carry them out today, at least at the extent that they did. Three important government advances, obviously the Hammurabi's Code that I mentioned in Babylon, and then the first time we see standardized coinage is in Persia, which is really important just for trade value, and addition of a good road system to be able to trade with other civilizations. So now moving on to ancient Egypt. Egypt is unique in that everything they do revolved around Pharaoh. He was basically a dictator. I don't think they technically called pharaohs that, but just like in Mesopotamia, there were many small cities, each with their own pharaoh, and they would have huge pyramids made so that they could live many years even after death and rule the land. So the three major things from ancient Egypt, it's the first time we see social classes. You can see there's pharaohs at the top and peasants at the bottom. So the higher you are, the better you are off in the civilization. We also see chariots be introduced in Egypt, and that really helped the pharaohs gain power through war and taking civilizations by force. And it was the first time that we saw people follow the guidelines of a leader even after he dies. So moving on to ancient India, we see that they believe in reincarnation. So this is much different from everything else that we believe because they think that they are born, and based off of what they did in their past life, that is where they are in the social ladder. And because of this, they can't move within um, within their system, under the caste system, until they die into their next life. So the three major things from ancient India are the caste system, the law of karma, which is basically if you do more good in your life than bad, then you will possibly move up into the higher, I guess, ranks of the caste system. In ancient China, the role of government is important because their rulers are said to be directly chosen from Yu, which is their sort of god, and they are called the I guess Xia is how you pronounce that. I don't really know. But China's government practices are much different because they were so isolated. Um, they didn't pick up any other traits from any other cultures that we had seen previously. And in ancient China, it's the first time that we actually see a sort of dictatorship or an autocracy from an emperor. And his name was Shi Huangdi, and he came into the Qin dynasty. And he made the Terracotta Army, and he did this to sort of protect his body when he died, to try to rule after death, just like the pharaohs did previously. Um, Before that, they followed the mandate of heaven, and they thought that their god would choose who should lead, and they didn't have any arguments in who would lead based off of that. This was the first autocracy, and we also saw the first civil service system in China. So now going on to ancient Greece. So they sort of started out in city-states just like Mesopotamia and in Egypt. And we saw a democracy first take place in Athens, I believe. And Greece advances governments more through practices of democracies and oligarchies. And this is seen in Sparta. They had actually 2 kings. So they had more than one ruler. And this was really odd for the time. Ancient Greece was also founded a court system, and they had 9 chiefs of state. Ancient Greece was definitely the most fair so far towards the people, and the people had more power than ever before. So this was the first time an assembly was held, and the people would make the government decisions based on voting. Draco was a person, and he reformed the laws that would give harsher punishment towards people, and this was quickly reversed later on. Sparta decided to rule based on fear and created a massive empire due to this, with many advanced war tactics and chariots, and just being more advanced than those around them. So now moving on to Rome. Rome actually had the most complex government that we'd seen so far, with many set roles to divide power and make it fair for the citizens. Rome started out as a republic, so the people had the power. Rome, this was the first time that women actually had any say in government. They couldn't actually vote at the time, but they were given many more rights, and this was a huge step up from the other cultures, where men would just have all the power. There were also social classes found in Rome, with patricians being more wealthy, and they had most of the power within the government. The farmers and the merchants were called plebeians, I guess is how you say that. And they still had say in government, but they weren't being put into those roles. They sort of just knew their place, and they would just do merchant and farming. So Greece, this was the first time that you actually had to serve in the military to become an elected official. It was mandatory for men to serve in the military, but I don't think for 10 years. But if you wanted to hold office, you had to be in there for 10 years. This was very important because it helped narrow down their choices of leaders and really pick who was worthy. When Caesar came to power, he tried to reform the government and made many public works. And he actually was killed because the citizens figured that he was trying to make another autocracy, and he did not want that. They did not want that, so they murdered him. This was the 12 tables of written laws was written during this time, and we use many principles even to this day from it, including innocent until proven guilty and equality under the law. Many civilizations take on innocent until proven guilty, at least to some extent, to this day. So early American civilizations, most of them were nomadic up until the Olmec civilization, so they never really had a way to advance. They sort of just survived. But once we reached the Olmec civilization, we saw them take power due to trade. They did have kings that ruled over the land, and they said that they could speak to the gods, so the people did not really challenge them. They sort of just let them lead. And priests and warriors had power over everybody else underneath the king. And the Aztecs, when they came along, they actually created a government, and this was the first time that we saw tax. So they would conquer other civilizations around them, and they would still let those people survive, but they would be taxed just to survive. So the first time the government used taxes was during ancient America. And the first time we saw a social system that would actually move in between classes was here. Before, you were sort of just born, and wherever you were born, into what family, you would just perform whatever tasks they did before. But in this, it was totally different. You could be whoever you wanted to be based on your income and skill set. So trade was very important during this time and was one of the main reasons that they grew. So now in the Middle Ages, they used the feudal system, and that pretty much decided how they worked and played and lived. Uh, chivalric code was introduced during this time to add a sense of honor and loyalty to the actions that the knights performed underneath the king. And it's basically, chivalric code is basically etiquette and conduct. Once the Crusades began, this event, or the chivalric code, went out the window. This is pretty much the first time that we saw people forcing their religion through government force and military force. It was so in the Middle Ages, a new form of parliament was introduced, and this came later on in England, and this included the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And this was introduced basically to weaken the power of the lords in the land. And we also see the manor system being first introduced. And this was basically giving the peasants basically a way to live and initiative to work on the land. They would be given housing and protection and clothing as long as they worked the hours that they were given. And the feudal system was introduced to identify power throughout the land. So yeah, that is my presentation.